up in Transvaal, there's a sandgrouse called the yellow-throated sandgrouse, which is the size of a racing pigeon. And they are very difficult to catch, especially for an eyas hawk. Passage birds do it a bit easier. And in my second year, I went up there, and I'll never forget that flight. It was on a friend of mine's birthday, and she just flew to literally a pinprick, and we flushed 5 or 6 of them. And I think that stoop that day was the most memorable day. It's like burned into my memory for so long.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Told podcast. And we're about 7 episodes now into this series that's brought to you all by the Cape Falconry Club. And as always, I have to give them a very big thank you for helping to make this series come to fruition and for trusting me to bring their stories out to the wider world. It's always going to be very, very appreciated, and listening back to all these memories and what seems like forever ago now, but was only a few months ago, man, it's been really nice reliving a lot of these conversations, and I hope you all have been enjoying them. Also, a big shout out to the Falconry Heritage Trust for their small grant that helped make this series happen as well. Without that small grant, I probably wouldn't have been able to afford the airfare and other expenses to help make this series happen. So big thank you to them. And if you haven't yet, head to falconryheritage.org to check out more about their mission and their goal to continue to help preserve falconry's cultural heritage around the world. It's definitely worth the effort, and I highly recommend that you go there and help support them. And, of course, a big thank you to one of our newer supporters of the podcast, being Bobby Yaga Crafts out of Poland. If you haven't heard me brag about his equipment yet here on the podcast, well, it's great stuff, and it's become a staple of my falconry. Pretty much uses anklets pretty exclusively now, and the anklets that he makes with the Marshall Easy Twist nut sewn into the sides has become one of my favorites. So if you haven't had a chance to check out his equipment yet, I highly recommend you do so. His contact information can be found on our website at falconrytold.com, and he's also at Bobby Yaga Goshawk on Instagram. So this was another great episode for me to be able to do, because it was another chance to talk to another falconer who is partially responsible for the formation of their province's falconry club, as well as kind of being involved in the falconry legalization process in their respective province as well. And I also was fortunate enough to be able to get a chance to see one of his birds fly and his dogs run while I was there as well. So I really hope that you guys enjoy this episode with Francois. He was a really great guy, and it was great getting a chance to know him and hear some of his stories while I was over there. So without further ado, we're just going to jump into this episode here, and I hope you enjoy hearing another falconer's perspective with this process. So without further ado, you will get a chance to hear Francois Breedt's story, and we'll jump right in. Here we go. What is it now? I guess we've kind of been around each other in passing, like, a few times now? We've all kind of had our own agendas, but...
Yeah, it's been quite a eventful couple of days with all the rain and stuff we've had. I actually haven't had the time to meet up with everybody at the field meet as well, and it's nice to be out here. Nice to be talking to you. Hope your trip has been sort of informative, and meeting new people and learning about how we do things back here in SA. And it's nice to be here.
Yeah, well, no, thank you for your time and for being another guest that agreed to take the time out of their meet and their socialization. And it's really been eye-opening and hearing about how the differences are between everything you all have had to go through in these different areas, as opposed to, things that we do and, we deal with. And then also learning, how other countries, just the stark differences really has been, pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think in South Africa, we're quite privileged with where we are with falconry. As you rightly said, every province has got their dealings with their provincial sort of nature conservation departments, and geographically we also are quite diverse. Not a big country, but I think if you travel from the northern parts of the country down to the Western Cape, you're going to go through a range of diverse vegetation and landscapes. And we're fortunate in falconry we've got a very healthy national body. All the clubs are affiliated to that. Basically, very similar to what I think you guys do at NAFA. And it's basically just to standardize everything we practice and mentor and stuff. So I think we're in a good place. It's due to the hard work of a lot of people back, I would say, in the 80s. I know there was some falconry legalized before then. Not very familiar with that, a little bit before my time. But I think the middle to late 80s was a lot of groundwork was done to get falconry where it is today, through various players in different provinces. We try to standardize our grading system, very similar to what you guys have got with the sponsor and your tutorship and stuff like that. So we're fairly good. I think I've been to the US a couple of times. Other falconers have traveled more abroad than I did. And it is prevalent. I think falconry is at a good place. I don't know what your thoughts are, what you've seen. But I think South Africa, holistically, we're in a good place with falconry. We've got a great wild take, different amounts and totals of different species. We've got some access to some nice captive breeding birds. I think in a nutshell, we're in a good place.
Yeah, and as far as the wild take aspect of things, I was relieved to hear that you all have access to that. And I think in the U.S. sometimes it's easy for us just to kind of I don't want to say take it for granted, but we're so used to it. And also seeing like these other countries that don't have it, like the UK, and I mean, you've listened to the podcast and stuff. So I mean, like hearing some of the differences in the other countries with like that don't have it, and I would definitely, I would much rather have it than not have it.
Yeah. I think it opens up falconry to people that don't have a big bank balance, but it's also a nice way of introducing new members to species which can be released. They can fly them a season or two or longer if they would so wish. But and it helps you understand the art of falconry a bit better. We're living in an era now where we're thrown with drones and GPSs and stuff, which is a big privilege. But I think there's a big fundamental way of looking at falconry, what they did in the old days. I refer to the 1800s and maybe early 1900s when falconry was very rife, especially in the UK, in Europe. And so there's definitely, it's nice. And you see a lot of the younger members come through, guys just out of school or sometimes in school still, and they've got access to African goshawks and Lanner falcons. I mean, there's 2 Lanner falcons as you've seen here. And it's nice to know, because you don't want to just tell a guy to buy himself an expensive Jip peregrine. I think he loses the crucial part of what falconry is actually about, so we're very privileged in that regard.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting seeing how, with your system and the way everything works. I mean, and with our system, it varies between state to state, but I mean, like I know in Indiana, kids as young as 12 can become apprentices, and it doesn't happen very often, but at least the opportunity is there if you've got the parties that are willing to deal with those logistics and circumstances and things. But I think, like I said, dealing with wild take and just being able to go and buy a bird, it is 2 completely different things, and it does make you appreciate more when you're able to deal with something that is truly wild. All the different aspects of things that go into developing. It's a different developmental relationship. You go about things a little bit different way, and it's yeah, it's a different appreciation with all of that. But, as far as though, I mean, where you're from in particular, you're Free State, correct?
Yeah, I was born and bred in the Free State. Been in Cape Town now, I think 12 years.
Okay.
Yeah, my falconry was actually an interesting story. We, when I was at school in 1986, we had a book, prescribed book, English was second language, and it was My Side of the Mountain, which I think is quite prevalent in a lot of the podcasts, how people got triggered by that.
Yeah.
But before that, I was always out and about with an air gun, always wanted to fish and hunt. And listening to a couple of your previous podcasts, I think a lot of people come into falconry via aviation, the love of aviation, or naturalist or bird watcher. I came into falconry because I wanted to hunt. And reading the book was like a trigger that was pulled. And I was just like, could this be done? Is this, and I mean, those are the days before internet. And there was one or two guys at school with me that was sort of dabbling around it and trapping hawks and stuff. And it was illegal those days. I mean, the Free State is a very Afrikaans culture, and but very conservative culture. So the conservation authorities were not very open-minded to anything outside what was legal at the time. And I went to the army. We were compulsory army. Went to the army in 1989. Was compulsory 2 year, came out in 1990, and then was sort of trying to find my feet. But, had a couple of kestrels and stuff when I was at school, but never really amounted to anything. So I can't really say I was a falcon. I was more, finding my way in and having my folks drive out on a Sunday to go trap kestrels illegally and stuff, So and so then I was glad to hear that when I got back, there was one or two people that was at the university at the time that formed the Free State Falconry Club, but it was in its infancy at that time, and just through talking to nature conservation and they're saying, oh, there's a guy, Stephen Squires, who's got a bird in Jacobsdal, and Howard Waller in Parys, which is on the border of the Free State and Gauteng, and so I got connected through falconers. And looking back now, I think Zimbabwean falconry was very fundamental, laying a platform on how to do it properly in South Africa. There's a guy with the name of Ron Hartley. I think you've heard of him. Great guy, did a lot of scientific studies on titers and peregrines and lanners. And so I think what happened in South Africa, and that's my take on it, is that various role players from other provinces went and saw how to work the model there, how to propose a constitution that's acceptable to nature conservations in different provinces in South Africa. And but because I think of Ron's and the Zimbabwean Falconry Club at the time, scientific studies, that was a good motivative reasoning to allow falconry because of the knowledge that falconers carry as prevalent in the peregrine front. I mean, that's a wonderful story with Tom Cade and all the guys over there. So so then basically just got obsessed, literally obsessed. I chose work, that allowed me to fly birds, and just got so obsessed and made an effort to meet up with these contacts that, I gathered in the early 90s. And, a book can only teach you so much. You learn from people. And so those people were instrumental in also helping me form where I wanted to be, And, so very privileged in that regard.
Yeah, it's like I said, that's one of the main things that's been so fascinating about this trip is just hearing kind of the overall origin study of this whole country and the different things that you all have had to deal with continually to, keep it and, to grow it. And like I said, as far as, I'm sure you've heard me mention, and people I'm sure, again, are tired of me saying this, but geographically, I'm just terrible, with knowing where things are at, and just like as far as where around where you live, like in the Free State and stuff, like how where is that kind of on the map, and how what challenges do you have getting from place to place? Like is it super tough from getting? I mean, I know you're in you said you're kind of in and around Cape Town now or whatever, but like before, how hard would it have been for you to kind of get from there to here, and what challenges are there with with kind of crossing the border with birds and things like that?
Yeah, so excuse me. So the Free State province is basically in the central of South Africa. It's bordered by the Orange River, the Orange River, and also the Vaal River, and then a couple of geographical mountain ranges and stuff. So the most of it is open grass plains. There is some agriculture, maize and sorghum and wheat planted, more around the higher rainfall area. I lived in a city called Bloemfontein, which is the main city in the Free State, and where I hunted was basically cattle and sheep country. So we had beautiful grasslands, very similar to I think in Nebraska and Kansas, from what I've seen in the US. And I was blessed. I mean, we didn't have to drive far. Still, the guys up there, you've got access to beautiful partridge hawking with pointers, great duck hawking out there. Coming to Cape Town, moving across border, this, the Western Cape, especially where we are now, has got a totally opposite winter to what the rest of the country got. So there, the winters are dry most of the time. I mean, they get the occasional rainfall in winter, but this is unique. The Western Cape's got, and more specific to where we are now, a lot of winds, very windy area, and high rainfall. As you could see, we've had more rain than for the last 42 years, so it's quite a challenge.
It's been awfully wet.
It's been awfully wet. So, yeah. So, and I think any direction you drive, if you go to Natal, they've got some beautiful grasslands there. You go to the Eastern Cape, very similar to the Free State. So it's not like in the States where you drive 15 hours before you see a change of grassland and geographical areas. Literally you can drive 2-3 hours and the vegetation just changes. I mean, you've seen coming from Cape Town to here how just, you think you're in the Karoo, up here in the mountains where we are. So, but yeah, challenges coming cross border. We've with hawks, it's basically you can bring your bird with, as long as it's permitted. It's got to get transferred to the new Falconry Club. If it's a captive bred bird, same story. And some of the provincial authorities are very accommodating, so we can travel to another province for a period of 3 months, as long as that province know we're bringing birds in. That's just all to, I suppose, just to keep documented where the birds are going and what their movements are like. But yeah.
Well, it's definitely more than at times than, like I said, what we have to deal with. And, and there are certain things, of course, as that we have to deal with depending on what state you're going into. Sometimes you have to have different, veterinary, bills of health and things for your birds, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, as far as just some of the different things that you all have to do with getting all the different permits and stuff, it sounds like that can be pretty tedious at times in a way.
It can. I think in the Western Cape, this last 2 years, we were thrown with a lot more paperwork. But I don't always see it as a problem. I think authorities do these things. And that's my personal take on it. It's not always that they're trying to stop falconry. I think it's just to try and keep control of things. As you know, South Africa is rife with all sorts of wildlife industries. And some industries have had a bad rap. And I think, you get thrown under the same umbrella. And it's just a bit more paperwork. For me, it's not an issue. I'm not very good at paperwork. My wife always jokes with my fellow falconers and say, you better just send me that stuff so I can make sure Francois got it done. But no, to be honest with you, and I think what it does is it acts, especially in the Western Cape, it acts as a filtering system. So you really don't want to have 200 guys running around with hawks. People, it's not a hobby. It's an art form. It's a way of life. You don't want people running around just doing what they want and got no animal ethics, hunting ethics. So I feel it's not a bad thing. And I think conservation, maybe some of it is a little bit overboard, but currently I don't perceive it as a big problem, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so basically, in your opinion, the juice is worth the squeeze, as far as all the extra hoops you have to jump through then. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, if you want to hunt with a rifle in South Africa, we've got very strong gun laws, much stronger than or tighter, regulated than in the US. I mean, I would love just to go to a shop and buy myself a nice gun, but the work that you need to do to get a gun license is, in my opinion, 20 times more than just following the rules with what the Falconry Club's been provided by their conservation authorities.
Yeah. Well, and as far as, just kind of going back to a little bit of the discussion then about, the clubs, and, that's one of the other things that I've found that's been pretty eye-opening is that, even if you go out and buy a bird, it still technically belongs to the club, and the club as a whole is like, kind of like more of the body then that has to deal with, your main country's, club and all those kind of things. It definitely works different in that way. But I mean, you were pretty involved to some degree with the Free State Club and the, some of the, I don't know, you had a position on that at one point, didn't you?
Yeah, I've had some great friends, colleagues, if you can call it that, from the club committee. Stephen Squires, I think you met him at the conference. Anton Miller, Howard Waller. So we worked on a rotational basis of chairman, vice chairman, and secretary, treasurer. Basically we drove the club and we formulated systems that's in line with the rest of the country. But at the time, I made an effort of having a very good relationship with the conservation bodies. I'd made a point of going to say, how's it? And just knock on the door and have a cup of tea, especially with the ornithologists, because I think they play a major role in wild take decision makings and stuff, because they're basically the scientists. So a lot of work went into just educating them a bit better, not in what they've been taught, but our falconry is not bad in wild take and information like that. So yeah, I've been in and out. Like I said, 12 years ago, we decided to move to Cape Town for various reasons. And but yeah, we had a good system. There's some great falconers that came through the ranks because of what you were saying. We weren't just dishing out falcons, and a lot of people that want to get into that hunting, I say, just go buy yourself a shotgun and a nice dog, and you will have a wonderful time. This is a way of life or sport or art, in whatever context you want to use it, that's, it challenges your relationship with your spouse or your girlfriend and family. The balance act is difficult.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. And that's another thing I find too, is the more falconers that I get to know, it's like that balancing act. Some are willing to sacrifice or dedicate a little bit less than others, and not even in all the different ways you would think sometimes. Yeah. But it is interesting, just some people, even though we think sometimes we're ate up with all of this and, all the sacrifices that we make and stuff, it's been interesting talking to some folks that it's just like, wow, I wouldn't do that, or whatever. And then there's people that you're going to meet too, that you kind of wish there was a little bit more of a presence and stuff. But, I don't know. I don't know how you are. I try to worry more about me, and what I'm doing. And, I've got too many irons and too many different fires to worry about too much about what other people are doing other than myself, and keeping up with mine on my own. But
I think, John, the thing is that you've got to find what makes you tick. Mm-hmm. If it's micro hawking or slope soaring eagles or bashing bushes with Harris hawks or flying ducks or grouse or whatever with long-winged falcons. Myself, I always aspire to a very high standard of falconry because that's my nature. I don't do things half. But that's not always to say that every falconer that comes to the sport needs to do that. And I think what we've done in the Western Cape, and kudos to the club committee at the moment, Andre and them, we try and pair the right hawk for the right person's personality, his access to quarry, what his time schedule's like, his financial situation. So, and by doing that, we've been more prevalent in helping make those decisions. I mean, it's not mandatory, but the club will guide you. And every single person that we've helped go on a path has come back and said they've had the most fun they've had in the whole falconry career. So I think the club plays a major role in that. Like I say, I mean, coming up here in the mountains with my dogs and hunting the grey wing in these difficult conditions, for me is a challenge. I always like to raise the bar for myself. And so, yeah, I think the clubs play a very, very vital role in creating healthy falconry going forward.
Yeah. Well, and without spending too much more time talking about, because I've spent a lot of time talking with different people about the whole club, aspect of things and how you all do the grading system here and all that. But I mean, just out of curiosity, being as you have been involved with, like the kind of inner workings of, the clubs and things like that in your past. I mean, I've kind of asked, because one of the things I do like to get people's opinions on is like, in what ways do they think that things could be eventually progressively be made to be better, or if there's anything that you personally would change, or, if you like the way the system is, that's already in place, or if there is anything you would even change.
Well, yeah, to answer your question, I think in the Western Cape, I don't think there's been such a healthy, I won't say not a healthy club, but in the way that if you look at all the birds being flown, I don't think in the history of the Cape Falconry Club, and I might be wrong, but has there been such a healthy number of long wings, short wings, of good hawks and falcons that catch quarry? It was always, not just here, countrywide, it's, you go to field meets and there's always one or two guys that hawks that stand out and they got good dogs. Where I think we've tried to change that system, and it basically comes back to what I just told you now about pairing the right birds for the right people. Not everybody's long wingers, not everybody's micro hawkers. So yeah, I think trying to change things, it's just, I love the world evolving. I think you just constantly got to try and evolve and try and make things better. And mentorship, for me, mentorship is the golden, make the right decisions. For argument's sake, if a guy staying on a farm, we've got this new youngster that you've seen, Alvain, he's got that beautiful lanner that I trapped for him. Help him, guide him, mentor him properly, and then he will enjoy himself, because otherwise it just becomes a frustration, We've sort of changed a little bit from the old routine in the Western Cape, from what the rest of the country was always doing. But it's not a decision that was made to go upstream. It was more to help the falconer. Skills development, as I call it, Without necessary skills and mentorship, you can go and Google and watch YouTube videos, but you need somebody that on the ground that really helps you. And it's a sacrifice, as a mentor, you sacrifice your time, but it's wonderful sitting back and you look back at the club and you see all these guys, not just youngsters, I mean, let's call them new members. You just see the quality in their birds and their love for being out there and doing what they're doing. And I mean, that's why we do the sport.
For sure. And so basically, it's not so much the rules, regs, and what's written down on paper as much as in your opinion, then, as much as just the other intangibles of just pairing people up with the right people, and also making sure you're doing that much extra due diligence to bring in the quality people, is more than anything else. Then basically is kind of what you're saying. Yeah,
and to get back to our wild take, I mean, to get back to the lanner discussion, you give a guy his first long wing. He's been an apprentice or for a year, so he's shown interest in coming out with falconers and learning about the quarry and what they do. And you trap him a lano, you assess a good mentor to him. But if a passage lanner has got this whole skill set, it's fit, it knows quarry, it's got footwork. You don't want to bother him with an IS, and you've got to teach him now about, first you need to get the bird fit. And, Pitcher explains it quite well in his book, The Flying of Falcons, the mental development of birds, because if you throw a person with too much information, they're going to fumble, it's too much to take in, and it's, you don't know where to grab and where to let go. So, to get back to that, and I think it's the decisions that the club makes for the right person at the right time, the right hawk for the right conditions, is paramount. So yeah, that's I think we're on a good roll, as you've also seen in some of the birds. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it seems like your system works pretty well, and I'm a big firm believer in a lot of ways of don't try to fix things that aren't broken necessarily, and like you said, I mean, it seems like so far from the people that I've met and the people that I've gotten to know over this past week that, there is a good core in place here. And you're absolutely correct in that. I mean, mentorship and how you're brought up in a certain thing, especially this thing, can kind of just make or break your overall experience.
Yeah.
But as far as now going back some to, your personal falconry, I mean, you mentioned the whole, hunting gray wings, and, that's kind of what you really like to do. And I mean, what in particular about that form of hunting and, that prey base is what is fascinating to you about all that? As
I'm getting older now, I fell in love with pointers. Because to get back to when we started, you drive on the gravel roads and see a covey of Orange River Franklin, which is some of the Franklin that's prevalent in the Free State. And you'd put a falcon up and you want to try and flush them and they're just gone. They just disappeared. And I got a dog basically. I've always been an animal lover, but I got a dog, a pointer, actually a great pointer from a friend of mine, Howard Waller. And just started falling in love with the dog work. And I enjoyed duck hawking and grouse hawking, but the choreography between dogs, the mountains, the wind, and a falcon in the mountains is just, everything's got to be perfect. You got to choose your flashes and stuff. And I think it was when we were listening to Dave Jones last night, and how they're flying those red grouse up in the moors, And it's like he says, he likes to make it difficult for himself because it raises the bar within himself, And but the dog work for me is I'm at the point in my life where I enjoy running dogs as much as I do flying hawks. Just seeing a pointer, casting in the mountains and running, just using the air scent and draw into the the birds and stuff. It's just a wonderful experience.
And it's funny that you mention that, because the further I get into falconry myself, the more I've started to, I don't consider myself a dog expert by any stretch. I mean, I know how to, kind of deal with dogs a lot better now and this, that, and the other, but I feel like I'm just now starting to, understand and really appreciate the true value of having dogs in your team. And I know it's really been my recent, my getting my dachshunds going recently is kind of what spurred that for me as well. And it's always really cool, talking to other guys that really value, using dogs as part of their hunting team, because I've found similarities in that almost everybody that uses dogs or has dogs in their teams end up almost valuing the dogs just as much, if not more, than the birds. Like, some of the guys that I've talked to, I think if you held a gun to their head and made them choose, you can either have birds for the rest of your life or your dogs. I'm pretty sure I know which one they would probably choose. I mean, are you kind of in that category also, or?
Yeah, I must say, a lot of people ask me, and outside falconry community now always ask me, do You know, are you affectionate to your birds? And for me, it's a difficult thing to answer. I think you're affectionate to the birds, but it's more for me, it's an admiration, affection, if I can put those two, where dog is a love of affection. You know, it's two different things. But it's, you know, watching a dog and going into the mountains and just, it's wild. And you have to be physically fit as well. You know, you need to walk. You know, like yesterday, we walked for 3 hours and we found a couple. We didn't catch anything, but we had some great flying. But I always used to get a bit bored with getting things done. And, you know, now what's next? You know what I'm saying? And I fly a little bit of RC, aerobatic planes and stuff as well in my off time. And, you know, I remember getting my trainer and watching these guys doing these barrel rolls with RC planes and like, hell, I want to do that. I don't want to be just flying any plane, you know. For me, it's like raising the bar. But not everybody's in that frame of mind. And also to get back to the dogs, excuse me, you got to be careful not to just tell people to take dogs, because not everybody's living situation is conducive to gun dogs. And you know, gun dogs, highly energetic dogs. So a lot of falconry can be done without dogs. Mm-hmm. And a lot of falconry currently is being done without dogs. You know, grouse hawking, duck hawking, it's an aid and a benefit. But I think if you're not vested into dogs as much as what I am and a lot of falconers are, and see the appreciation of how they contribute to the team. You know, my wife always says to me, she says, you're striving for the impossible. You're trying to get the bird and the hawk and the quarry and the weather conditions in together. Why don't you just choose something easier? And I said, well, that's when it comes together, that's really special.
Well, and I think also you make a good point in that there needs to be just as much mentorship with dogs as there, you know, really with birds in a way too, because, you know, I really wish that when I was doing my homework initially, you know, I also have vigilance. When I was doing my homework on that particular breed of dog, what caught my eye as an apprentice, you know, in that early mindset was just, you know, more of the history of the breed as opposed to thinking more about the practical application of that breed where I live. And in retrospect, I mean, very much love our dogs and, you know, they're very much a part of our family, but going with the dachshunds up front, or, you know, a breed like that was much more conducive, or is much more conducive to where I'm at and what I'm doing. And I think it's also important to, you know, take those into consideration just as much as, you know, picking the right bird for the right quarry and where you live and all those things as well. So,
yeah, it's, you know, with pointers, I'm, you know, which it's, you know, and the word English pointer, I mean, the breed was originated in the UK, but they call them pointers now. It's a highly specialized animal. You know, it needs to get exercise, especially the new genetics, the American genetics. We've imported quite a bit of that, and it's the same as flying a long wing. You know, it's a lot of dedication. But my personal point of view, if you want a good retriever, just go and join a field trial club. You know, there's a wealth of information. The genetics, you can go and look at some of the dogs that the guys are planning to breed with, so you can look at the different personalities, which is important because a falcon you can release or retire to a breeding project, whatever. A dog is your companion. You know, it's not that easy just to, if it doesn't work for your household, to get rid of it. So yeah, I just say to the guys, I do field trials as well, and lovely community. Share the same passion as what we do as falconers, but just with the dogs. There's not an extra element in it, and that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, the dog community can be different as well, you know, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've probably heard us discuss that, you know, from time to time too. But it was very eye opening. I mean, attending my first field trial and having that experience, you know, for the first time myself, not too long ago, it was eye opening. You know, it's definitely different. It's a different world, but yeah, I mean, it definitely is you know, in a lot of cases, a 10 to 15 year commitment for, you know, to have that as part of your family. And, yeah, and it's a lot of extra provisions as well, you know, for, people that like to travel and like to do other things. You've got to make sure that, the dog's just as well taken care of, if not, and, is in some people's eyes, and if not more taken care of than the birds, but
yeah,
but yeah, no, I just, like I said, it's one of those where you basically have to think a lot going into it. And like I said, I don't regret any decisions I've made personally, but yeah, if I had it to do all over again, I definitely would have went with a smaller breed. Even one is kind of sometimes stubborn and independent as, the wiener dogs. But anyway.
Yeah, you talk about smaller breeds. I had a friend of mine imported some Jib prairie falcons from a falconer, Dave Dixon, up in Salt Lake City. Oh, I can't even remember what they done in 2003 or something. And when I acquired this, I just wanted to hunt ducks with something that had prairie in them because I like the striking ability of the prairie. And I got a little Springer Spaniel. And for 8 seasons, we hawked and just caught ducks. And she was a wonderful, wonderful dog, smaller breed, could jump in the footwell of the passenger seat, and just a wonderful temperament, So, yeah, it's pairing the right dog again for the right reasons, Same with what I discussed earlier with you with the hawks.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get an English pointer if you just want to beat bushes in front and look for hares. It's not the right dog,
I'm sure that being dog people, we could talk all day about that in particular too. Yeah. But I think now would be I do, before we switch subjects again though, I do want to ask you in particular, like especially about the gray wings. As far as, your methodology and going about hunting them and stuff, I mean, it's pretty much the terrain that we're in right now. The best way to, that's, like I said, that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about this week so far is learning about you all's prey base and how different it is, to what we have and stuff. So, I mean, I've seen quail hawking, I've seen, other types of things, but like this type of stuff is still completely foreign to me. So describe a little bit for anybody listening, kind of what goes into, trying to hunt, gray wing.
Well, first of all, you've got to find the vegetation that's not overgrazed or burnt or where the vegetation is too sparse. So you need to have an understanding about your grasses and plant species, because I mean that's fundamentally what they live off and provides them protection and breeding and stuff. And generally they are more inclined to be a higher altitude species. That's sort of the rule of thumb with gray-winged francolin. They seem to be more in I call it highlands, not mountains literally, but hillsides. And we always in the Eastern Cape you'd find them at higher altitudes. And so they're basically a mountain or a montane species. Their coveys can get up to 20 birds in a covey, which I haven't seen any other partridge species covey up to that size. And they're also quite a specialist francolin species. They're not like some of the spurfowl and the Swainson francolins and Cape francolins that congregate around houses and stuff. Normally, they're quite a specialist species. So it's obviously finding, I call it sort of plateaus in the mountains. You get a slope and it levels out to a sort of a plateau. That's what they seem to like, because they want to be able to sit out of the wind as well. So still trying to figure them out 100% here in the Western Cape, but I think I've got it quite sorted. I found where, especially we've got the Renosterveld Karooboes type. It's a very hard shrub, and then you get the grasses in between, which seems to provide them with ample food and places to hide and give them enough cover.
And in your particular opinion, is there a particular, particular species of longwing that's better suited to hunt them? Or, I mean, is it something that you can also hunt with hawks too? Or
yeah, you can. Look, they're very fast flying species of game bird. I think your black sparrow hawks, looking at our short wing species, you don't want to first phase them. You want to give them a fair chance. They don't, obviously, as you know, they're not a grouse that'll fly 80 kilometers far. They don't have that ability, but they've got a very 400 meter sprint in them. That's very, very fast. So your black sparrow hawks in the short wings, the one that comes to mind. The others are too small because they're quite chunky little bird, you know. I think very similar to your chuckers that you get in the US, or your Huns. I think the Huns are a little bit smaller. But then the longwings, the rule of thumb is not to go too big. What we've found, especially in the grasslands, is that the silhouette of the bird can be intimidating sometimes. They feel threatened, and then you get them where they dump and jump. They fly, and then when the bird comes, they just dump into the grass, which doesn't provide a very nice aesthetic flight. So rule of thumb, anything, I'd say from about 500 to 800 gram range. Species, hybrids, peregrines, any of those sort of species. Even the Lanner falcons do very, very well on them.
Cool. Yeah. So it's more of a size than a speed.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Well, cool. Like I said, thanks for the quick introduction to that too. I mean, so I've gotten a chance to see that very briefly so far in this week of wind and rain, you know. Yeah. but yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, it looks pretty neat, and especially considering like the terrain. Yeah, it is high, and you can, you know, if you're not used to it, you can feel it, you know, after a bit. But at the same time, the the foliage and everything else isn't too bad to traverse, I guess, either. I mean, it's for the most part, the terrain is pretty easy to walk through, you know, even though the altitude is, well, we're up in the clouds basically. But no, it's been fun. And I mean, as far as, you know, I think this is a good time then to go ahead and transition to, you know, the story time part of the of the podcast. But I mean, what particular hunting story always comes to mind whenever you think of one of your, you know, prime hunting experiences, or, you know, one of the favorite birds that you've flown, or, you know, share one of those things with us if you don't care.
Yeah. You know, I think I've flown so many birds in my life, and you know, we always seem to look at the ones that fly the highest, but you know, I think it's always probably for me, it's one of the first ones that you got that really was up there, but you didn't have any other reference to measure it against. And 30 years later, you look back at that time and you think, wow, she was really up there. Talking about a specific little peregrine, African minor peregrine that I flew. And she was just a honey. I mean, her personality, she didn't sit, she'd always try her best. And one thing for me with hawks is consistency. You know, I don't like a bird that only needs to fly at a certain time of day and perfect conditions, because I like an all-rounder, you know, it must be doing its thing. So in 1990, let me just think, 94, 95, I bought a bird from Tim Wagner's breeding project at the Transvaal Falconry Club. Small little African. She was one of the smallest size. She flew at 645 grams. And she was basically she wasn't my first peregrine, but my first captive bred African peregrine. And yeah, I think, and she was just, from the start, she was just with the program. You know, she really, the first year I entered it into Sky Trail, we won it. I think we won it once or twice. Came a couple of second, third places. And up in Transvaal, there's a sandgrouse called the yellow-throated sandgrouse, which is the size of a racing pigeon. And they're very difficult to catch, especially for an IS hawk. You know, passage birds do it a bit easier. And in my second year, I went up there, and I'll never forget that flight. It was on a friend of mine's birthday, and she just flew to literally a pinprick, and we flushed 5 or 6 of them. And I think that stoop that day was the most memorable day. You know, it's like burned into my memory for so long. But I had a lovely relationship with her. I mean, I flew her for 7 or 8 years. Always had something else that was part of the team, you know, another bird. But she caught yellow-billed ducks, partridges, doves, grouse. She was really, really something else. And just a honey to be around with, you know. So I think I'd put her there. I had that Jib Prairie that I was referring you to. He was just a machine. I mean, he was just, but never had the connection, if you want to put it into an emotional connection, like you asked me earlier on, like Penny. And I think it's, the birds like that come at a time in your life where you're still young and you go through different times in your life, and the bird's always there. It was like that dog that's always accompanied you, so I think her name was Penny. She was really something else.
I can't imagine you having a overall better connection with a peregrine than say something like a Gyr Prairie. That's such a shocker.
Yeah, I think it was just it's just, with certain animals you get a connection, and it's difficult to explain.
No, and they say there's kind of a saying, as you know, within the falconry community, it's like every falconer at some point, if they stick with it long enough, always ends up having one special bird, like their one, like that they'll never be able to top. It'll always stick out as like that one. And then it's like after that, whenever something either happens with that bird, or they have to, whatever ends up with the next bird, they have to fly, and the one after that, and the one after that, it's almost like they're trying to find that one connection again.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's cool. Well, and I guess, we can go ahead and wrap this up here shortly. And I want to go ahead, though, and ask you the same thing that I've been asking a lot of the falconers that I've had on as guests recently, and that, if you don't care, just leave your, best piece of advice or words of wisdom, sentiment, whatever you want to call it, to, either current or future generations, or, people thinking about, getting into the sport.
Yeah, it's funny. I think, as we're all getting older, you look back and you reflect on certain things. And myself, if I look back, it's good to be performance driven and result driven, but never lose the fact of the enjoyment factor. I think once you lose the enjoyment factor, you become a problem for yourself, because you're more driven to results, and we're working with live animals. We're not working with a radio control plane that you can fly vertically unlimited. We and the more, as I'm getting older, the more I'm starting to realize that. Same with dogs. Just they're animals. So but if you go out, you get out in the mountain, like we are now, and you wait for the sun to come up. Just cherish the moment. Just enjoy that moment and look at the grass, look at all the other birds around you, and the beautiful countryside, and just be thankful that you're healthy and you'll be able to do the sport. I think it's a lot of things we take for granted. But if you're not having fun and put results within yourself, this is not a sport that you do to impress people. Then you're in it for the wrong reason. Then you should go play team sports or something. So just enjoy it. Enjoy it.
Yeah, but you have to admit, though, sometimes it's easy to get sucked into the numbers game and get a little competitive with that group that you always go out with, that always constantly has to rib you and everything else. But well, I mean, it sounds like you've had a pretty fulfilling career thus far in falconry, and yeah, I mean, it's been good getting the chance to sit down with yourself and everyone else that's been willing to do this. And like I said, we're always appreciative and very happy to get the chance to kind of spread these stories and yeah, I mean, like I said, just thanks again, and I guess I don't know. We'll see how the wind dies down. I don't know how much more is going to be accomplished the rest of the day. I know I'm going to be talking to a couple more people, but were you planning on getting out again later? Or
Yeah, tomorrow morning and Saturday morning is really looking good. We're going to go to some plateaus that haven't been since we arrived here. I've been watching the weather since last week, and I just saw it wasn't going to change. So we're looking forward to. Pointers are well rested today, so we'll go out there tomorrow and Saturday morning. So glad if you can put your hiking boots on and feel like burning a couple of calories. Come take a walk with us. It's just the views up there is just breathtaking.
You need to come to Indiana sometime. They're not so breathtaking, but you'd have fun, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
And if you ever want to come and experience some Midwestern dirt hockey, you're more than welcome. And and thank you for the invitation. And as I said, thank you for your time and for doing this.
No, thank you very much, and thanks for you guys for using the technology we have these days in bringing the messages across from all over the world. You know, it's like I said to you earlier on. It's sometimes nice just to make a cup of tea at night and lie in bed and, you know, just switch you off from all the world's problems and listen to people's falconry stories. It's wonderful, and how everybody sort of got into the sport and everything. So yeah, kudos to you and your team and for bringing this together.
Well, thank you. And I guess there's something positive to be said for not having nightmares, you know, having to listen to this right before going to bed and stuff too. You know, going to bed, I'm sure with the sound of my soothing voice is always just amazing.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, well,
thank you.
Thank you, Francois. I appreciate it.
Cool, man. Thank you.